In a neighborhood that seemed peaceful on the surface, sometimes the only thing separating harmony from chaos is a single, unassuming power outlet by the fence. It doesn't make noise, it doesn't flash, but when the wrong person plugs in, without asking, the consequences echo louder than any warning ever could. And this story began with what seemed like a harmless act: borrowing electricity without permission. I'm Daniel Briggs, an industrial electrical engineer, 35 years old. Most of my life has been spent designing power systems for high-rises, underground parking garages, and sprawling shopping malls, places nobody ever thinks twice about how the electricity works, so long as the lights are on and the AC's cold. I moved into Arbor Ridge 2 years ago, a quiet, middle-class neighborhood with neatly trimmed lawns, white-painted mailboxes, and those tiny HOA signs that carry the weight of state law. Truthfully, I'm not great at small talk, but I respect boundaries and just wanted to live out the rest of my life in the house I renovated with my own hands. My house shares a fence line with Malcolm Everett, a retired insurance guy in his 60s. But the problem wasn't him. It was his wife, Claire Everett. That woman. She's exactly what you'd expect from one of those HOA Karen videos online. Bleach blonde hair, a screechy voice, a constant face like she's smelling something rotten. And worst of all, she thinks she runs this neighborhood just because her husband used to be the HOA vice president. Everything started earlier this summer when I decided to upgrade my backyard, laid down a wood deck, added a stainless steel table, set, some string lights, and installed a weatherproof outlet by the fence, perfect for plugging in a coffee maker or some music on weekends. One crucial detail: that outlet is wired to the same circuit as my basement's sewage sump pump, because I've had one flooding incident before and I'm not letting it happen again. Then, one weekend afternoon, as I was in the kitchen making lemonade, I saw something that made me freeze. Claire Everett was running an extension cord through the fence and into my outlet, dragging along an electric lawnmower from her side of the yard. My eyes nearly popped out of my head. I walked out, trying to keep my tone civil. "Hi, Mrs. Claire, I noticed you're using my outlet." She turned, completely unfazed, flashing a smirk like I'd just complimented her lawn. "Oh, just for a minute, Daniel. I needed to tidy up this corner. Hope you don't mind?" Mind was putting it lightly, but I held my ground. No, electricity isn't free. I put that outlet in for my own equipment." She raised an eyebrow like I was being cheap. "Come on, it's just a few cents. You're an engineer, I'm sure you can spare it." Then she turned her back and kept mowing, as if that one sentence somehow made it okay to plug into someone else's power. I walked back inside, telling myself, maybe it's just a one-time thing, no need to escalate, but I was being naive. Very naive. I should have trusted my gut. What I thought was a one-time borrowing turned into a pattern of entitlement. The following week, I looked out my window again. This time, it wasn't a lawnmower. Claire Everett was sitting in her patio chair, casually drying her hair with a full-sized hairdryer, plugged into my outlet. I stepped out, this time less polite. "Claire, I really need you to stop using my outlet." She looked at me like I'd just kicked her cat. "Daniel, come on, it's just electricity. Don't be so uptight. We're neighbors, aren't we?" I kept my tone steady. "It's not just about the money. That outlet is connected to a critical system inside my house. It's not for public use." She scoffed, rolled her eyes, then muttered something about engineers and their precious wires. I clenched my jaw and went back inside. But it didn't stop. The next week, it was a cordless vacuum, then string lights for her backyard, garden soiree, then a water fountain. Always plugged into my power. No text, no request. Nothing. By the fourth time, I confronted her directly and firmly. I told her straight up that this wasn't okay and it needed to stop. Her response? Not an apology, not even a promise to consider it. Instead, she got smug. Oh, really, Daniel? Nolan says you built that new deck of yours without submitting an HOA improvement form. You do know that's a violation, right? I stared at her. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about electricity. This was leverage. This was manipulation. Her husband, Nolan Everett, may be retired, but he still sits on the HOA board. A relic with a clipboard and a power complex. And Claire? She was more than happy to weaponize that position against me. Maybe we should just leave things the way they are, she said sweetly. You let me use the outlet. I don't tell the board about your little unauthorized deck project. And, just like that, my property became her bargaining chip. What Claire didn't know, and what made me smile that night over a glass of bourbon, was that I had submitted my HOA form. I had official approval, just not from her husband, but I also knew how HOA wars could spiral. I'd heard stories, lawsuits, fines, harassment campaigns. I didn't want to go down that road. Not yet. So I made a choice. I walked away, but I started planning. Not revenge, not sabotage. Science. I'm an electrical engineer. I know circuits. I know load balancing. I know what happens when you misuse a system designed for something else. I couldn't stop Claire from being entitled, but I could make sure the next time she stole from me, she'd learn exactly what happens when you mess with the wrong outlet. And the first summer thunderstorm was just around the corner. The first thunder rumbled like an omen. The meteorologists on Channel 8 were already calling it the biggest storm in 3 years. Flash flood warnings were rolling across the screen. But while the neighborhood rushed to fill sandbags and check gutters, I was checking something else, my sewage pump circuit. You see, I'd made a few upgrades. Nothing illegal, nothing dangerous, just a subtle rewiring. The outdoor outlet, the one Claire Everett couldn't keep her entitled hands off, was now running on the same circuit as my sewage pump. Now, before anyone calls foul, my sewage pump has a fail-safe, a battery-powered backup, remote monitoring, alarms. I wasn't setting a trap, I was setting up a lesson, one taught by physics, not confrontation. That Friday afternoon, I stood on my second-story balcony with a cup of coffee in hand, watching the clouds roll in from the west like a giant angry wall. The sky was bruising. Winds were kicking up leaves and patio furniture. But what caught my eye was movement at the Everett yard. There she was, Claire, in her signature wide-brimmed hat and fluorescent gardening gloves, scrambling to throw a tarp over her new flower bed. It had cost her thousands. A French-imported hydrangea hybrid, she'd bragged at the last HOA barbecue. Then I saw it, the cord, that same bright orange extension cord slithering across her lawn like a snake. She didn't even hesitate this time. She reached over the fence like she owned the place, plugged in the pump she'd rigged to suck water off her flower bed, and fired it up. My sewage pump hummed, then slowed, then stopped. The alarm on my phone chimed once. Pump circuit overload. I smiled grimly. Inside, my backup system kicked in as designed. I'd already moved valuables off the basement floor just in case, but I also knew something Claire didn't. Our homes sit on a slope. Mine is slightly higher, hers downhill. I had no idea how poetic that would soon become. For the next 6 hours, the sky unleashed hell. Rain fell in sheets, drumming the roof like war drums. The street turned into a river. I could hear sump pumps whining up and down the block. But inside my house, everything was calm. Warm, safe. Claire, on the other hand, was back outside again by hour 4. I saw her through the window, soaked, cursing, fiddling with the pump. She had no idea her theft was choking the system that kept my basement dry. And more importantly, she had no idea where that water was now going. It wasn't until 8:03 p.m. that I got the call. Daniel, it's Fiona Patel, our HOA president. Stern, fair, respected. The kind of woman who didn't waste words. We're getting reports of flooding across the neighborhood, she said. Are you all right? I told her I was dry, systems working fine. She exhaled. Good. But the Everetts, they've been hit hard. Their basement is under 6 inches of water. Jesse's screaming. Malcolm looks like he's in shock. I paused. Did their sewage pump fail? No, that's the strange part, she said. It's working, but the water keeps rising. And Daniel, it's sewage. They think there's a backup somewhere. I almost dropped my coffee. Sewage? Backup? Oh no. I opened my monitoring app and reviewed the logs. Claire had been drawing heavy power, exactly during the hours my main pump was disabled. My backup had kept my basement safe, but the water that didn't drain from my side, gravity had handled the rest. It has flowed. Downhill. Straight into the Everett's beautifully finished, hardwood-floored, French hydrangea-scented basement. My jaw clenched. I hadn't planned this, not like this. But at the same time, I couldn't help it. This was karma, delivered in gallons. That night, as I watched the storm fade into silence, I poured a whiskey and sat on my deck. The lights from the Everett house flickered erratically. Shouting echoed into the air. I imagined Jesse and Malcolm knee-deep in their own disaster, finally realizing that actions have consequences, even if they come disguised as a free outlet. But this wasn't over, not yet, because Claire wasn't the type to quietly accept defeat, and I had a feeling the real storm was still brewing. The morning after the storm, the skies were spotless, not a cloud in sight. The sun beamed down as if nothing had happened, but I knew better. The real storm hadn't hit yet. At exactly 9:12 a.m., my phone rang. Fiona Patel, president of the HOA. Calm, professional, not one for gossip or drama. Daniel, emergency HOA meeting tonight at 6. Clubhouse, we need you there. It's about the flooding. And the Everetts. I didn't even have to ask. I already knew where this was going. By the time I arrived at the clubhouse that evening, the place was packed. The air smelled like damp carpet, dollar store air freshener, and stale coffee. Dozens of neighbors filled the chairs, some still in rain boots, others whispering about flooded basements and broken pumps, but no one had it worse than Claire and Malcolm Everett. They sat near the front, Claire in a stiff, beige blouse, Malcolm looking like he hadn't slept in 24 hours. His socks were still wet. Fiona opened the meeting, her tone as firm as her posture. Thank you all for coming. Last night's storm was the worst we've had in years. Most homes handled it well, but one in particular suffered catastrophic damage. Claire, and Malcolm Everett's basement is under nearly a foot of water. Sewage water. The room went still. Damages are estimated around $30,000, she continued. Wood paneling, furniture, electronics, all of it ruined. I could feel the eyes shifting toward me. Fiona gave me a nod. Time to tell the truth. I stood up and took a breath. I'm Daniel Briggs. I'm an electrical engineer. My basement stayed dry last night thanks to a backup sewage pump system I installed. I glanced toward Claire. She stiffened. But here's what people don't know. The outdoor outlet on my back fence, the one Claire Everett has been using without permission for months, is on the same electrical circuit as my primary sewage pump. Gasps, whispers, chairs creaked as people turned to look at Claire. I asked her, repeatedly, to stop. I even sent a formal email. I warned her that this outlet wasn't for public use and that it was tied to a critical part of my home. Claire shot out of her chair. You set us up. You knew exactly what would happen. You wired that outlet on purpose. Fiona held up her hand. Claire, did you use Daniel's outlet during the storm? Claire's voice cracked. It was right there, on the fence. I thought it was for everyone, I answered calmly. It's on my property. It's clearly mounted on my fence. I built it for my own use. I warned her not to touch it. From the back of the room, someone muttered. That's trespassing. Claire turned red, flailing. He's lying. He did this to us on purpose. An elderly neighbor stood up. Margaret Olson, who'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. Even if he did, maybe now you know how it feels. You've been using Nolan's position on the HOA board to bully people for years. A murmur swept through the crowd. Another neighbor, Frank Torres, chimed in. Nolan threatened to fine me for putting in a new gate, just because I asked him to do something about their dog barking all night. Then Lisa Abernathy spoke up. He rejected my solar panel application because Claire said they were ugly, even though I followed every regulation. The dam had broken. One by one, neighbors rose and unloaded years of grievances. The Everetts had weaponized their HOA status to control, criticize, and crush any resident who didn't play by their self-made rules. And now the community was, watching them drown, just like their basement. Nolan finally stood, trying to salvage what was left of their reputation. This is ridiculous. I've always followed HOA regulations. Maybe I've been strict, but that's to preserve the community's standards. Fiona's voice was quiet but commanding. Nolan, until we complete a formal investigation into your conduct, I'm asking you to step down from the HOA board. The room erupted into applause. Applause. Claire looked like she might faint. Malcolm didn't say a word, just kept his eyes on the floor. And me? I didn't smile. I didn't gloat, because I wasn't proud of how far this had gone. I didn't want their lives destroyed. I didn't want sewage in anyone's home. But I did want one thing, for people like Claire Everett to finally learn that stealing, whether it's electricity or power, comes with a price. And sometimes, that price is 30 grand, and a reputation that can't be mopped up. I thought it was over. The community had finally seen Claire and Nolan for who they really were. The HOA board had begun its investigation. The neighbors, once silent, had found their voices. For a moment, it felt like justice had been served. But I forgot one thing. Karen doesn't go down quietly. She reloads. It started with a text from my boss. Need to see you in my office first thing tomorrow. Something important. Tom. Tom Parker was a good man, level-headed, VP of engineering, at the firm I'd worked at for 8 years. I'd never once had a problem with him. But the tone of the text, something was off. The next morning, I walked into his office and found Julie from HR sitting beside him, folder in hand, looking concerned. That's when I knew. Derek, Tom said, we've received a formal complaint regarding your conduct outside of work. My throat tightened. From a neighbor, Julie added gently. Claire Everett. Of course, she's accusing you of using your professional expertise in a malicious way, of rigging an electrical system to sabotage her home. She says you abused your training to cause thousands of dollars in property damage. I stared at them, stunned. My heart was hammering. That's not what happened. Tom raised a hand. We're not saying it is. But she also contacted Robert Kingston, our CEO, through one of her community contacts. Apparently Claire's in a garden club with the mayor's wife. She's claiming you're a liability to the firm. It hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just HOA gossip anymore. This was war, and she'd taken it to my career. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything, calmly, clearly. I told them about the months of stolen electricity, the ignored warnings, the threats from her husband, the rewiring of my own outlet on my own property, which I had legally and safely modified. I even explained the backup systems I installed to avoid any real danger. Julie nodded as she took notes. Tom leaned back in his chair. It sounds like a personal neighbor dispute, but this complaint puts us in a bind. We have to conduct an internal investigation, standard procedure. Standard procedure. That was corporate speak for, we believe you, but we need to cover our ass. I walked out of that office with a pit in my stomach. Claire hadn't just tried to humiliate me in public. She was now trying to ruin my livelihood. I should have seen it coming. She'd lost her social power in the community. Her HOA puppet husband had been knocked off the board. Her garden was drowning in irony and sewage. So what was left? My career. That night, as I sat at my kitchen table drafting an email to a lawyer, my doorbell rang. Cautiously, I peeked through the peephole. Fiona Patel, Ralph Kent, and a woman I didn't recognize, well-dressed, mid-40s, briefcase in hand. Opened the door slowly. "Daniel," Fiona said, "we heard what Claire did. We thought you might need backup." She gestured to the woman beside her. "This is Dorothy Ford. She's the HOA's legal counsel." They stepped inside and laid everything out. Claire had posted a lengthy rant on the neighborhood's private Facebook group, calling me a dangerous and unethical engineer, accusing me of malicious sabotage, and naming my employer by name. She had even encouraged other residents to report me to local licensing boards. Dorothy didn't sugarcoat it. "What she's done is defamatory. If this affects your job or reputation, it's grounds for civil action." Then Ralph said something that caught me off guard. "We have security footage. Apparently, one of the HOA-installed cameras, meant to monitor community entrances, also had a partial view of my backyard and the Everett property. Over the past month, the camera had captured Claire plugging into my outlet at least 6 separate times, and one of the clips even showed me asking her to stop. But that wasn't all. Ralph pulled out a tablet and played another clip, this one just 3 days before the storm. Claire sneaking out in the evening holding a pair of pliers. She leaned over the fence and appeared to tamper with the outlet. I leaned in, stunned. She cut something? "It looks like she was attempting to bypass or disable part of the system," Ralph said. "We can't know exactly what, but the intent is clear." Dorothy's tone was crisp. "This isn't just defamation. It's trespassing, it's property damage, and potentially criminal sabotage." I felt anger rise in my chest, but also relief. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid, she really was trying to destroy me. We spent the next 2 hours drafting a cease and desist letter. Dorothy also helped me write a formal statement for my company, explaining the situation and attaching the footage. Fiona agreed to co-sign it, confirming the HOA's support. Before they left, Fiona turned to me. "Daniel, this isn't just about one woman abusing a power outlet. This is about a pattern of bullying, manipulation, and retaliation. And this time she went too far." I nodded slowly. She picked the wrong engineer. There's something poetic about justice arriving in HD. The next morning, after sending my signed statement and Dorothy's legal letter to my boss and the HR department, I headed outside to check the outlet. I hadn't touched it since the storm. What I found made my stomach turn. The cover was scratched, the screws loosened. Inside, a mess of frayed wires, cut deliberately, then twisted back together, shoddily. Claire Everett hadn't just been stealing power. She had been tampering with the system. This wasn't Karen being clueless anymore. This was Karen going full felony. I took photos, documented everything. Then I sent it to Dorothy, who replied instantly. "Perfect. This proves intent and physical. Interference, we're adding sabotage and criminal mischief to the cease and desist." Later that day, Dorothy, Fiona, and Ralph returned with a printed dossier, thicker than a phone book. Inside were still frames of Claire using my outlet screenshots of her HOA Facebook rant, my email warnings, HOA security footage, time-stamped and logged, and the kicker. The plier tampering footage, but they hadn't come just to drop off a folder. Fiona had news. "Last night, we held an emergency vote, a full board meeting." She paused, letting it sink in. "We're forcing the Everetts to sell." I blinked. "Wait, you can do that?" Dorothy nodded. "Our HOA charter has a clause. Seldom used, but it's there. Any homeowner who poses a repeated provable threat to the community or its members can be compelled to vacate. It's drastic. But with this level of evidence," she let the sentence hang. "The board was unanimous," Fiona added. They have 60 days to list their property, 90 to vacate. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was stunned. Another part, relieved. But the biggest part of me, the part that had stood in my own backyard watching a woman shamelessly steal from me and weaponize HOA power to silence me, that part just whispered, good. Within 24 hours, the whole neighborhood knew Claire Everett, the queen bee of Arbor Ridge, was dethroned, stripped, and packed for eviction. The neighborhood Facebook page was on fire. Claire had deleted her rant, but not before screenshots had circulated like wildfire. Memes were popping up. Someone had photoshopped her face onto a power outlet with the caption, "Plug into this karma." Even the teens on the block were in on it. One kid flew a drone with a banner that said, "Bye-bye, Karen," but not everyone was laughing, because Karen wasn't done. The following evening, Nolan Everett showed up at my front door. Alone. No smugness. No clipboard. Just exhaustion. "Daniel, I think we should talk." He looked human. I let him in. We sat at my kitchen table. I offered him an iced tea. He accepted. "Claire's furious. Still blames you for everything. I want to sue, but..." He paused. "Our lawyer says we don't have a case. You warned her. And now the footage..." He exhaled. This all got out of hand. I nodded slowly. That's what happens when people ignore boundaries. "Yeah," he said. "I let her go too far. I liked the power, the HOA title. Though I was protecting the neighborhood, I was just enabling her." He looked up, eyes hollow. "We're staying at a hotel. The insurance company is fighting our claim. Says the damage was caused by negligence, not nature. We're drowning in bills." I stayed silent. Then, against every instinct, I offered, "When you move back in, if you need help checking the rewiring, let me know. I'll do it, free of charge." Nolan looked stunned. Then he smiled, weakly. "Thank you. That means a lot. I just hope Claire doesn't do anything stupid." "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "She's been calling people, friends from the garden club. They've got ties, city council, chamber of commerce. She's not giving. Up quietly." There it was. The chill. Even cornered, even caught red-handed, Karen doesn't stop. She escalates. "Just be careful," he said. "She's embarrassed, humiliated, and when Claire feels small, she tries to make someone else smaller." He stood, thanked me again, and left. And I checked every security camera, every motion, sensor, and reinstalled the alert system in my electrical panel, because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's this. Karen never quits. She just changes tactics. A week after the HOA board voted to force the Everetts out, the neighborhood started breathing again. Lawns looked greener. Walks were friendlier. People waved at me more. I even got a pie left on my porch with a note that said, "Thanks for standing up to them, finally." But the peace was short-lived. On Thursday morning, I opened my inbox to find an email from my boss. Subject, urgent. Reputation concerns attached was a PDF. Claire Everett had filed a complaint directly with the state licensing board, accusing me of gross negligence, professional misconduct, and, get this, intentional destabilization of electrical systems to weaponize sewage discharge. I laughed out loud, then I stopped laughing, because while the board had no legal grounds to punish me, the process itself could take months, delaying projects, damaging my standing, and worst of all, creating just enough doubt to hurt my future. Called Dorothy, the HOA's lawyer, immediately. She wasn't surprised. "We anticipated this," she said. "I've already sent letters to the licensing board, your firm, and the HOA legal committee, with footage, documentation, and sworn statements." But it didn't end there. Claire had also begun a whisper campaign, on social media, in her garden club, even at the local community center. The story kept changing. I was a creep, a psycho, a disgruntled neighbor with military-grade tools. She even went so far as to say I planted sewage in her basement deliberately. Yes, you read that right. She told people I installed a hidden sewage discharge trap in the hill behind her yard. I would have found it hilarious if it wasn't, turning into a serious smear campaign. But then something remarkable happened. The neighborhood fought back. It started with a post. A woman named Jenny Miller, who lived directly across from the Everetts, posted a long message in the Cedar Ridge private Facebook group. Claire Everett is not a victim. I watched her lean over Daniel's fence and plug into his outlet for months. He warned her, he emailed them, he even offered to help install one for their yard. She ignored him, then they threatened him, then she sabotaged him. The comments blew up. About time someone said it. Claire once told me my daughter's bike was too pink. Nolan rejected my porch light replacement because it wasn't HOA aesthetic. She told my kid his lemonade stand needed a business permit. Suddenly, people weren't just agreeing, they were documenting. One by one, residents dug into old HOA letters, screenshots, and recorded conversations. Turns out, Claire and Nolan had a history, a trail of overreach, harassment, and power games. Stretching back nearly a decade, Frank Torres posted a voice recording of Nolan threatening to fine him unless he quieted that damn dog. Lisa Abernathy posted her rejected solar panel application with every local and state approval already attached. Ralph Kent, yes, even calm, quiet Ralph, posted a spreadsheet showing HOA votes over the past 5 years, and in 91% of all board decisions. Nolan had voted against improvements, permits, or modifications, unless Claire was personally involved. It was a takedown, not by lawyers, not by force, but by truth. Then came the HOA meeting. Packed house, standing room only. Claire and Nolan didn't show. Fiona Patel walked up to the podium and cleared her throat. This meeting was originally scheduled to discuss neighborhood beautification projects, but given recent events, we're expanding the agenda. She turned to the crowd. We've all witnessed a pattern of manipulation, intimidation, and abuse of HOA power. We have documentation, resident testimony, and direct evidence of theft and sabotage. Then she paused, looked down, and added, "But this is bigger than 2 people. This is about how we let them get this far." Silence. Weighty and honest. Then she pointed at me. Daniel stood up, and he took the hits. Some of them are very personal. But because he spoke up, others did too. And now, we clean the house. The room erupted in applause. The very next day, a new proposal passed. Mandatory term limits for HOA board members, full transparency for all vote records, a new grievance protocol that allowed anonymous complaints, and most satisfying of all, a permanent ban from HOA service for anyone forcibly removed by board vote. Claire and Nolan were done. That weekend, I was working in my garage when a moving truck pulled into the Everett's driveway. For sale sign already up, their once pristine flower. Beds looked wilted. The hydrangeas had drowned weeks ago. I watched from a distance as Claire stood in the driveway, arms crossed, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Nolan glanced over, spotted me, and gave me a nod. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was tired. Maybe even grateful. But Claire? She stared at me like I was a virus that had infected her kingdom. And maybe I was. Because kingdoms built on bullying and entitlement don't fall from storms or sewage. They fall when someone finally plugs the truth into the circuit. It was a Sunday afternoon. The sun spilled golden light over porch roofs. The storm had passed 2 weeks ago, but its imprint lingered, on patches of grass that hadn't yet grown back, and on for sale signs still swaying in the breeze. Sat on the wooden chair out back, a glass of lemonade in hand, eyes resting on the fence where it had all begun. That outlet, once the spark of everything, had been replaced, sleek stainless steel cover, underground wiring now fully up to code, and no one dared come near it again. Claire and Nolan had moved out the morning before. No goodbyes, no parting words. Just a large moving truck stacked with boxes and a woman standing silently in her withered garden, as if trying to hold on to something long since lost. Nolan turned to me one last time, a small nod. No anger, no resentment, just the quiet gesture of a man who understood that the cost of misused power can sometimes be losing the place you once called home. I nodded back. Not out of vengeance, just closure. In the days that followed, Arbor Ridge felt different, lighter. People were more present, more open. Kids rode their bikes again without fear of being scolded for disturbing the peace. Doors stayed cracked open in the evening. Neighbors shared banana bread, peach preserves, and cold beer over fences instead of accusations. I started receiving invitations to join the Welcome Committee, the group that greeted new families moving in. I politely declined, but still pitched in my own way. I designed a standard welcome basket, a clear HOA rule sheet, a map of the area, a few small gifts, and one particular item, a high-quality 20-meter extension cord. I smiled as I placed it in the basket, just in case. So if anyone ever needs power, use your own cord, don't plug into someone else's house. One night, as I was winding down for bed, a message came in from Fiona Patel. We just had our first HOA meeting since Nolan stepped down. It was calm. Fair. Thank you for being the first to speak up. You changed this place. I stared at the screen for a long moment. My heart paused. I never thought a backyard outlet could spark a torch of justice. Never imagined that someone like me, quiet, introverted, more comfortable with circuit boards than conversations, could be the one to light it. I'm not a hero. I'm just a regular guy. But I know what boundaries are, and I know that when someone crosses them, you either stand your ground or you get pushed back forever. Claire Everett didn't lose because I fought her. She lost because the entire neighborhood saw the truth. And for the first time, they didn't look away. Today, when people ask me about the backyard outlet incident, I just smile. I won't go into details. I just say, that was the day this whole neighborhood flipped the switch. We often think tragedy comes from grand things, fraud, betrayal, unchecked power. But sometimes the thing that fractures a community is simply the failure to respect the smallest of boundaries, that outlet behind my house. Claire Everett once called it no big deal. But from that one small socket, this neighborhood learned one very big lesson. Boundaries aren't meant to be tested. They're meant to help us live decently with one another.